Cool. Yeah, so today at the crypto seminar, which is the first in the semester, we have Damiano Abrams from Aarhus talking about the impossibility of distributed samplers. So take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, today it would be a workshop, and yeah, where I haven't really had time to rehearse this a lot because of crypto and IT trade software. But yeah, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask questions whenever you don't understand. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So today I'm going to talk about distributed samplers, which are a primitive that I've been working on since the last 2 years, more or less. And yeah, basically they consist of unbound protocols for the secure generation of CRSs or other MPC protocols. In particular, today I will talk about the troubles we have achieving active security without random oracles. And later on, I will explain what happens instead if we go full on using the programmable random oracle. In particular, I show how to build a construction that basically allows, I don't know, some institutions to publish some methods on a bulletin board. Then later on in the future, any subset of parties can take these messages, or at least the messages of the institution they trust, and they use this to interactively generate a certain amount of correlated randomness, any randomness without having to communicate. So it's kind of magical, but yeah, it's possible. Okay, I will start by explaining what distributed samplers are. So this is something that is known since Eurocrypt 2022. So the work by me, Peter Scholl and Yakoubov. Still fine. Yeah, we are in the party setting.
Yeah,
It's still recording.
yeah, okay. And we have a distribution V. And basically, a distributed sampler for this distribution is a one-round protocol that implements the functionality that picks a sample from D and outputs it to all the parties. So formally, what happens is that every party, PI, sends a message. UI all simultaneously. And after this only round of interaction, everybody can obtain the output by running a deterministic algorithm on the transcript U1, UN. And you can observe that even an external observer can retrieve this output because all it's needs to know is the transcript. Okay. Yeah. Nothing is known about R. It's a R itself.
Is it like everybody sends the message and message will be broadcasted to every?
So everybody can broadcast the message in only one round, and then everybody can retrieve the output, like this sample of the distribution, by running a deterministic function on the transcript, U1, U1.
Okay, so the communication complexity here is going to be linear in the size of, or linear in the number of clients, right?
Yeah. And yeah, for everything I say today, we assume dishonest majority and static corruption. Okay, this primitive immediately gives an application that is a non-interactive generation of CRSs for MPC protocols. But actually it gives something more, because still in this work, we prove that if distributed samplers exist for a sufficiently large class of distributions, then we can actually generate large amounts of correlated randomness using only one round and logarithmic communication in the amount of generated material. Okay? So basically, these are a solution for trusted setups in general, using only one round. Okay, the natural question is, can we build this? And we started answering this question in this work. We started from the semi-honest model. And we show that it is possible to build distributed samplers for all efficient distribution. Using rather strong primitives, in particular I/O, multi-key FHC. And yeah, it turns out that I/O is actually needed because distributed samplers for all distributions plus WE imply I/O. And yeah, we did this in the plain model. So no CRSs, no random oracles. But yeah, this is the semi-honest model, so not the strongest security requirement. The natural question is, can we upgrade this to active security? And here we started having problems because this functionality cannot be implemented against active adversaries. And this is an immediate consequence of this impossibility for coin toss. So imagine that D generates a uniformly random string. Like, we have a one-round coin tossing protocol. Like, we need to allow some influence to the adversary. In general, there is a whole class of attacks that we cannot prevent. And in order to understand why, suppose that these two parties are honest and the other two are corrupted. We have this adversary A that is malicious, like it's active corruption. This adversary can use rushing against the honest parties. So it will first wait for the messages U1 and U2. And then it will start running the protocol in its head many times, using these two messages, the one of the honest parties, but regenerating every time the messages of the corrupted party. For each of these executions, we get a different output. Then at some point, the adversary can choose the output that it likes the most among the one that it obtains. It will send the corresponding two messages of the corrupted parties of this execution in its head.
Sorry, there's one question. Is there a high-level intuition why I/O and LWE imply samplers for all distribution?
Yeah, there is this paper about I/O from the previous LWE sampling, and yeah, basically distributed sampler are allowed to obtain I/O using that term.
Plain LWE, not like the weird
Sub-exponential LWE.
But not the like assumption in that paper which like get broken.
No, it's not that assumption.
Okay.
It's plain LWE.
So there are a few more questions. Is there paragraph on this, or is this a notion that you defined for the first time?
We defined it here in the Eurocrypt 2022 paper.
Yes, and then what is the security we want here in this setting?
Like the security, it depends how, like in semi-honest model, we just implement this functionality. Active security, I will explain in a bit. Yeah, and yeah, actually, then there is this paper at Crypto in which basically find a way around this impossibility. So there are new definitions of active security. But I will explain.
Hey, I just have one question. So what is the rushing adversary trying to do here?
Just to influence the output of the protocol.
So it wants to bias essentially.
It wants to bias it, yeah.
Okay.
What were I saying? Yeah, basically this adversary runs the protocol in its head many times, fixing these two messages and regenerating one of the corrupted parties. It obtains many different outputs, and then it sends the corresponding message. It chooses the output it likes the most. It sends the corresponding two messages. And yeah, all of a sudden, the output of the protocol is the value it chose. So, and yeah, this is something we cannot prevent, and it's actually an issue of all one-round MPC protocols. So in order to take this into account, we decided to modify the functionality for the actively secure setting. And we did this as follows. So basically, we split it into two phases. First, the functionality interacts with the adversary. The adversary will provide some query indexed by some label ID, and the functionality will just sample some value RID from the distribution, and it will give it back to the adversary. And this procedure is repeated as many times as the adversary wants, but in particular a polynomial number of times. After this, the adversary will specify the label of the sample it likes the most, and the functionality will output it to all the parties. So we are basically modeling the attack that I described earlier. And what I want to argue is that if the output of this functionality is used as CRS for an MPC protocol, then this protocol is still secure because yes, the adversary can choose the CRS, the output of this functionality, but it can choose it among a set of polynomial size containing random values. So with overwhelming probability, all these values would be secure CRSs for our protocol. Okay, so with this definition of security, still in the Eurocrypt 2022 paper, we built actively secure distributed samplers. Again, for all efficient distributions, using IO multi-KFHC and also NISX, but not in the plain model, but by relying on a programmable random oracle. And yeah, this is bad because yeah, random oracles don't exist and programmable random oracles are even worse. So in this work, the one that I'm presenting today, we tried to see if there is a way to build actively secure distributed samplers satisfying this definition without using programmable random oracles. And we found an answer to this question, and the answer is no. We need random oracles. In particular, we proved the following theorem. So, theorem. So suppose that our distribution D has mean entropy that is big. It's omega of log lambda. Lambda is the security parameter. So what I'm saying here essentially is that D is unpredictable. Whatever guess you have of the output of D, it will be wrong with overwhelming probability. So this is a very weak requirement. Then any actively secure distributed sampler for D in the UC model needs a CRS sigma. This is not really surprising, to be fair. But furthermore, the Shannon's entropy of the output of the distributed sampler given the CRS will be small. It will be O of log lambda. And this doesn't matter what the adversary does. This holds. And yeah, what we are essentially saying here is that actively secure distributed samplers without random oracles for this distribution D need a CRS. And this CRS almost entirely determines the output. And this is bad for several reasons. In particular, we prove some corollaries of this theorem that basically say, first one, the CRS is not reusable. And that's because if we run the distributed sampler twice with the same CRS, we will end up with the same output with non-negligible probability. And this shouldn't happen because D has high mean entropy. Second corollary, the size of the CRS can be at most O of log lambda bits shorter than the Yawa entropy of the distribution. So the Yawa entropy is essentially a way to measure how much I can compress a sample from the distribution D without losing information. What you're essentially saying is the CRS is roughly as big as the sample we want to generate. Then there is the third corollary that says
That's at least, right?
what?
Size of the CRS is at least that much.
Yeah.
Okay, is that gonna be super polynomial?
No, this is still polynomial, but I will explain later why
Okay.
this is an issue. The third thing is that sigma can be uniform only if the distribution D is obliviously sampleable. And what does it mean? Obliviously sampleable means that essentially if we leak the random coins used for the sampling procedure, then we leak no additional information about the output. To give an example, RSA moduli are not obliviously sampleable because if I give you the random coins, you know the factorization. Okay. And yeah, if a distribution is obliviously sampleable, we can get a sample from it without learning anything else in the random oracle model without interaction. Just get the random coins from the oracle and use them to sample. Those coins leak no additional information. Okay, so why is this bad? We are essentially saying that without random oracles, distributed samplers with active security are useless because they need a trusted setup. And this trusted setup is roughly as bad as the one we want to remove. Because here we have the setup is not reusable. It has as long as the sample we want to produce, and it cannot be uniform, so it cannot be really nice. Okay. Okay, now I would like to prove this theorem, and I think it's a rather huge proof. One more thing. So this impossibility holds in the UC model, but we actually believe that the ideas that I'm going to talk about can be generalized to other settings, in particular, even if we allow rewinding, honest majority, super polynomial simulation. It's a bit unclear whether they hold in case of a no black box simulator. Okay.
Back a little bit to your definition on active security. So, what do you want? You want this RID?
I want the one run protocol that implements this function.
No, for RID hat, you want the high entropy. The RID hat that the
No, I am not asking that. I'm just saying if there is an adversary, first it interacts with the functionality, gets as many samples as the adversary wants, and then the adversary chooses the one that likes the most, and that would be the output. Just want to do this. But then if D has high mean entropy, the output will have high mean entropy.
Like, do you need some like specific property like to measure their mean entropy?
No. I mean, it's a bit unclear how to measure it because you don't know what's the running time of the adversary. It is polynomial, but arbitrarily big polynomial. Okay.
Does the final hat ID need to be different from all the query?
No, it will be one of the queries. So first we get many samples, then we choose the one that we like the most. And this is the identity of the sample we like the most. Okay. So now I will prove that.
So why do you just model this attack?
What?
Why do you just like your definition model this specific Russian attack? Right?
Because you cannot avoid it.
So like are all the other attacks like avoided?
I mean, if we manage to implement this functionality, yes, in the programmable random oracle, we show that that is achievable. But without programmable random oracle, it is possible, but I mean, you have to rely on CRS, it is not reusable, long, and ugly. Okay. So basically, this work is saying this definition is not good enough if we want to stay to not rely on random oracles. Okay. So we start by assuming the existence of a distributed sampler that is actively secure against for this distribution D. And we start by considering the ideal wall. Yeah, there will be the functionality, the one that I described before. So first, like, let's call it FD. This functionality will interact with the simulator that will interact with the adversary. Okay. So this is the Russian adversary. So when we start the simulator, as the first thing needs to send the CRS and the messages of the honest parties. But before doing that, it's allowed to interact with the functionality. In particular, it will query for some samples many times as what's the polynomial number of queries. And yes, suppose that Q is the set of these samples it obtains from the functionality. And this Q is a set of polynomial size because the simulator is a polynomial time. So there will be some polynomial Q that bounds from above the size of the set Q. Okay, after getting this Q, the simulator will produce a fake CRS and messages for the honest parties. Will give them to the adversary. The adversary will reply with the messages of the corrupted parties, and all of a sudden, the output of the protocol is fixed. Because it's just a deterministic function applied on the transcript. But the role of the simulator hasn't finished because it has to instruct the functionality to out this value R hat to all the honest parties. But here we start having problems because there are two cases. The first one is R hat belongs to Q. And this is the good case because it means that there exists a label associated with R hat. So the simulator can just tell the functionality output this value that you previously gave to me, and we are good. But then there is also the bad case, that is R hat doesn't belong to Q. What do we do in this case? The only option for the simulator is to keep querying the functionality until the functionality gives back R hat. But this will happen with negligible probability because the distribution has high dimension. So essentially, in this case, the simulation fails. So it must be that we are in the first case with overwhelming probability. It doesn't matter what the adversary does. Whatever way it chooses you see, the output will be into this segment. So, in other words, what we're saying is that in the ideal world, CRS plus UH restricts the output of the sample in a set of polynomial size. So there is this set Q, and whatever the adversary does, we will end up. The adversary doesn't know Q, but will end up there. And yeah, it is possible to show that in this world, the Shannon's entropy of the output, given the CRS and UH, the simulated ones, is small. It's O of log lambda. Okay. Okay.
Oh, wait, what is R?
R is the output of the sample. R hat, I don't know, whatever.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's move to the real world. I think I have to erase the theorem. I hope that nobody kills me. So the real world, it's a bit unclear whether this equality holds. Because, yeah, Shannon's entropy doesn't really preserve under computational indistinguishability. We can have two variables that are computationally indistinguishable, but the Shannon's entropy of the two is very different. However, we prove that in our context, in our case, this still holds in the real world. Okay? And yeah, we do this by considering an attacker. So our attacker will get as input a CRS and messages from for the honest parties that are either generated according to the protocol or the simulated ones. And it will take a set, initially set empty, and then it will generate messages for the corrupted parties using the CRS, sigma, and random coins. And it will compute some value R, that is the output of the protocol when the CRS is sigma, and then we have UH and UC as messages of the parties. Okay. And finally, it will add R to the set. and repeat as many times as the adversary wants. And yeah, we show that if in the ideal world, the entropy of the output of the protocol, given sigma and U8 is large, it's omega of log lambda, then the set S keeps growing. So if I continue, I repeat this operation many times, it will keep growing. But in the ideal world, this doesn't happen because whatever UC I choose with overwhelming probability, I end up in the set. So I will get at most Q of lambda values. And yeah, so basically this attack would give a distinguisher. And we started by assuming that we have an actively secure distributed sampler. So yeah, it must be that this equality here holds even in the real world. And now we are almost done, because it's just a matter of applying the strong chain rule of Shannon's entropy. Yeah. Now, we consider a special adversary, indeed the most boring one, the one that just follows the protocol. So it gets the messages of the honest parties, and it generates the messages of the corrupted parties using true randomness and following the protocol. Okay. I will draw an entropy diagram. So I don't know how much you are familiar with Shannon's entropy, but yeah, Shannon's entropy has this nice property, essentially, that can be represented as these diagrams that look like Venn diagrams. So when you condition the entropy, it corresponds to computing basically the difference between sets, and the union of these sets corresponds to adding the entropies. I will give an example. Like suppose this is R, okay, and this is sigma. Each of these balls represents the entropy of a given variable. This is the CRS, this is the output. If we want to represent the entropy of the output given the CRS, this will consist of this, basically the difference between this set and the output. Okay. If we consider the entropy of R and sigma, so the union of the two variables, it will be the union of these two balls. And yeah, there is this nice rule that is called the strong chain rule that essentially says that this will be equal to the entropy, like this, the conditional entropy, plus the entropy of sigma. So if we represent this using this Venn diagram, this part is this part is the ball above, like union, and we get like the entropy of R given and sigma. Yeah.
What is the intersection represent?
Yeah, that's the. So I don't remember how they call it, but yeah, it's not the entropy. It's it's denoted by I, and now I. Mutual information. Yes, thank you. Anyway, let me draw a diagram. This is suppose U8, then we draw UC, and then we have R, and let's draw it like this with this weird shape. Okay. We start by considering this part. What is this? This is the entropy of R given, so basically I'm subtracting all the other sets. So UC, U8, and sigma. But yeah, given UC, U8, and sigma, R is uniquely determined. So this entropy is 0. There is no uncertainty here. So this part is 0. Then we have this. We know the entropy of R given sigma and U8 is O of log lambda. What is that? So I'm taking R and I'm removing sigma and UH. So essentially, I end up with this moon shape. But yeah, this is 0. So essentially, we are saying that this part here, it's O of log lambda. Okay. Now, we are considering the totally honest adversary. So by symmetry, also this must be O of log lambda, because it's totally symmetry. And so if we want to compute like,
What does it mean by symmetry?
because we are considering an adversary that is following the protocol.
Okay.
So this is essentially the entropy diagram of the protocol in which everybody behave honestly. So now you can like switch the role of the honest and corrupted parties, and it's again the same execution. We are computing the same diagram, but with switched roles. And yeah, using the same argument as before, you can show that this red part is all of the band. Okay, like in the theorem, I talked about this. So we still need to understand what it is, this y part. Then we can add all the terms. But yeah, as I said, we are considering the totally honest adversary. In particular, it will be that UC and UH are independent conditional sigma. And what does this mean? It means that this area in the middle, including this thing that we don't want, is 0. There is no mutual information in UH and UC given sigma.
Yeah, that's because it's small.
And yeah, now we need to understand, it's a bit unclear what, if this part is 0 or not, because some of these could have also negative values. Like if this is negative, this is positive.
So just a second. So why is the middle portion 0 given sigma?
UH and UC, the messages of honest and corrupted parties, are independent of each other given the series.
I see. Okay.
I don't know, is it clear or?
Not very clear.
I don't write this. So essentially, the entropy of UH given sigma is equal to the entropy of UH given sigma and UC. Why? Because UC gives you no information about UH. Sigma tells all the
I see. Okay. Yeah.
Then you can subtract
Got
stuff.
it.
Yeah. You will end up with what I just described. Okay, now I want to focus on this triangle. And what is that? That's the entropy of UC given R and sigma. So I'm considering this big part. And then I want to subtract this other part. That is the entropy of UC given R, sigma, and UH. But clearly this is bigger than this because, I mean, given only R and sigma, the UC is more unpredictable than if I give you also UH. So this is positive, means this is positive. But then this blue, the part we are interested in, is negative because the sum is 0. So, oh wait, let's skip. And now we can finally compute the entropy of R given sigma. It will be 0 plus all of lambda plus all of lambda plus something negative. So in the end, all of the lambda. And the theorem is true. Okay. How much time do I have left? Okay.
Maybe.
No, but I mean, then you have also something to do after, like, I cannot keep you here forever.
So one sec. So can you repeat the last argument? So what is the entropy of R given lambda? So it's 0 plus.
The value in this bolt, let's say. So the entropy of R given sigma is this.
Right.
So we have 0 here, something negative here, something that is O of log lambda here, something that is O of log lambda here.
Right.
You add this, you obtain O of log lambda. So you prove that entropy of R given sigma.
Okay. I see.
Exactly what we wanted to prove. Okay.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know, like
Like 20 minutes and then like
20 minutes.
ideally, yes.
Okay.
Like
Then I will skip how to prove the corollaries, even if it doesn't take long. Instead, I want to talk about the second part. And yeah, this is the part that, to be fair, I've never rehearsed, so I hope it will be clear.
So what is the conclusion of this negative result? Like,
the conclusion is, okay, we proved the theorem that says the entropy of the output given the CRS is O of log lambda.
right?
There are corollaries of this theorem that say that the CRS is not reusable. It's long, in particular, roughly as big as the
Sample.
sample we want to generate, and the CRS cannot be uniform unless the distribution is obliviously sampleable.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and basically follows by the fact that we are essentially saying that the output is almost entirely determined by the CRS.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So party dynamic constructions. So imagine a world in which we have a bulletin board, like a blockchain, whatever you want. And the major institutions of the world just publish some message. For instance, I don't know, the European Union puts some message M1, then I don't know, some NGO puts some message M2, the United Nations some M3, and so on. Okay. The primitive that I'm gonna talk about and that can be built by relying on a programmable random oracle allows any subset of external parties that may be far in the future, so way after this institution published the message. So these parties, imagine, want to run an NPC, but they need a CRS or a correlated randomness. So with the primitive I'm going to explain, the parties can just retrieve a subset of these messages, the one of the institution they trust. And without having any interaction, they can generate the correlated randomness they need. Even if like this correlated randomness wasn't known at the time these messages were published. Okay. And yeah, no interaction is needed. Okay. Another thing that I want to point out is that when the institution publishes one of these messages, they don't need to know which other institution published the message, neither how many parties will run the NPC protocol in the future. This can be arbitrary, the correlation can be arbitrary, and the other set of participants can be arbitrary. And they can also join at whatever step. Okay.
Is there a threshold for the number of messages that need to be used?
As long as one party and one institution is honest, the output is safe. Okay. All right. So how did we build this crazy thing? Basically, we built what we call a succinct universal sampler. So I need to explain what a universal sampler is first. Probably a universal sampler is an object that gets as input some distribution, and it outputs a sample from the distribution without leaking any additional information. Okay, so you give the distribution for RSA moduli, you get an RSA module of unknown factorization. You input the distribution for the CRSs like g to the alpha, g to the alpha squared, and so on, and you get it without knowing alpha. Okay. But yeah, now these universal samplers were built in a paper at Eurocrypt, I don't remember when, by Hofheinz, Mark Zander, and Waters. Yeah, I don't remember all the authors. Dakshita Purana. Yeah. And yeah, they built something that looks like this, if I had to draw it. Like, it's a big object. Takes as input a distribution, D, and it outputs a sample R. And here there is something weird that happens. Basically, you can think this as an obfuscating program, okay? But yeah, this object comes with an upper bound on the size of the distribution that can be given in. And yeah, the size of this big object is greater than L.
What does it mean by the size of the distribution?
Like the size of the circuit that describes it.
Oh,
Okay. Now, what we built instead is a succinct universal sampler. So it's a tiny object that, yeah, it won't get as input the whole distribution D, but it will get a tiny piece of D. And it will output a tiny piece. And yeah, if we provide all the pieces of the distribution D, here we get many different tiny pieces that can be reassembled into R. Okay? And yeah, this is what we call a succinct universal sampler. And yeah, to be fair, as input, we also need to give some random points.
Just a second. So in this succinct sampler, so what are the tiny pieces that are output?
Like, I will explain later how we will build this, but yeah, imagine that it's basically an object that doesn't need to get the whole distribution as input, but it gets like gates. And yeah.
So a single tiny piece is not a sample itself. Given enough number of these tiny pieces, you can arrive at this R, essentially.
I will make a spoiler. Essentially, here the tiny pieces will be gates of the distribution D, and what we get here are garbled gates.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And yeah, together with the pieces, we need also to give random coins, and the random oracle will take care of generating this. And yeah, another thing is that also this object comes with an upper bound on the size of the distribution which can give us input. So this should be smaller than some L, but now the size will be polylog in L. And this is the succinct requirement. Okay. All right. Now, suppose that we managed to build this object. I would like to explain how we obtain this weird distributed sampler, because this can be viewed as a sampler in some sense. It's just that the set of parties is unclear, and also the distribution we sample from is unclear. Yeah. Suppose that, like, let me go. Now, we simplify the setting, and we assume just that the parties, instead of generating correlated randomness, they want to generate a CRS from some distribution D. And then actually, when we have this object that just generates CRSs, we can obtain also the one for correlated randomness, because as I said, distributed samplers imply distributed samplers for correlated randomness. Okay, we just need to rely on a PKI to be fair, like all parties need some public encryption, public key. Yeah. Okay, now we have, suppose n parties that want to sample from this distribution D. Like we assume that each method the institutions published was actually one of these objects. So each institution created one of these succinct universal sampler and it published it on the website. Now, it would be great if we are able to use this object that are published to generate like distributed sampler messages for this distribution D. Now, I don't know what I'm saying is, suppose that this is the set of institutions the parties took. We have these unbounded universal sampler messages, and we would like to use M1 to generate a distributed sampler message from the distribution D. And this N and this N should be different. Let's call it kappa. So we would like to use MK to generate a distributed sampler message UK for the distribution D. And if we are able to do this, at that point, we can obtain a sample R from D. And as long as one of these parties is honest, we are good. But yeah, what is the issue? The issue is that this primitive comes with an upper bound on the distribution. And sample it could be that the distribution of that generates each of these methods is really big, way bigger than that L. So what do? We do the following. So suppose that this is M1 or any other of these messages. Yeah, we use it to build, and suppose that this is with threshold L. Now we use this to build another copy of itself, but bigger, of size 2L. With limit to L. Like now this one will take as input distribution of size at most 2L. And yeah, if this is big enough for our UI, then we are done. Otherwise, let's double the size again. So now I don't have space anymore. It would be too big, but yeah, we will pick one that has size threshold 4L. And if that's not enough, 8L, and so on. And yeah, in a logarithmic number of steps, we will end up with something that is sufficiently big to generate this message. And at that point, I get my CRS. And as long as one of these is generated honestly, I learn nothing about the output. Okay, now I finally want to explain how to build this. And yeah,
But you still need enough of these, right? Like,
enough of this, what?
it's like this K needs to be large enough, right, for this to work.
What?
The K you choose has to be large enough.
No, this is just the number of parties.
Yeah, but it has to be large enough because you said that you can only get a sample only if like you get enough small pieces.
Wait a second. So this is just one of these messages at one. Okay? Like what we do is we take the distribution, we split into pieces, and we input it in this. We get many different outputs, and we can reconstruct the output. Now, what is the distribution D I input into this? It's the distribution that generates a copy of itself, but of bigger size. Okay? So I do this for each of these messages until, I don't know, from this M1, I obtained a distributed sampler message Q1 for the distribution D. And from MK, I obtained a distributed sampler message for party PK and distribution D. And yeah, at that point, I have K distributed sampler message for a K party distributed sampler. And yeah, I can get the output. Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. Okay, now I want to explain how we build this we are the object. And yeah, as I said, the trick is we use the locality of garbled circuits. Each piece of the distribution we give is actually a gate, and what we will output will be the garbled gate. And yeah, of course, that object is an obfuscated program. So we need unicorns to build some unicorns. All right. So the program will have a gate. Let's call it Z. Suppose that the labels of the input wires are M, B, and the output is the wire C. And this program will have a puncturable PRF key CK that we call the garbling key. And yeah, this garbling key is used on input A to retrieve the label of the wire A. So this will be also is a mess. A0A, A1A. I assume that you are familiar with garbled circuits. And yeah, it will do the same for B. A0B, K1B, and yeah, the same for C. So K0C, K1C. And yeah, then it will also generate some randomness by giving as input, I don't know, G, A, B, C, like the whole gate. All right, given this, it will garble the gate G using the labels we just derived and using the randomness R. Okay, so here there will be K0, A, yeah, you know. And at the end, so we get, let's say G hat. This would be the output. Okay, I want to say a thing, like what happens if the gate we give is an input gate? Like, remember, we want to sample a value from a distribution, so the input should be random values. So what will happen is we just output a random label for that input. Okay, that corresponds to evaluating the circuit on the random. Okay. All right. So essentially, this program will generate a garbling of my distribution. Then I can evaluate the garbling. I already know the labels of the input wires, and I will get as output my sample. But yeah, I want this construction to be secure because, in particular, I want that if I input different distributions, like I get independent garbling. So how do I ensure this? The solution is I use a different garbling key for every distribution we give as input. And usually this is ensured by a functional PRF. So there will be some F prime with some other key that is recorded here that takes as input the distribution, it generates CK and then it garbles. But the issue is these to be like it will make this program very big. So what I do is I give as input together with the gate a hash of the whole distribution. And yeah, basically I put the hash into this functional PRF. I use the output as the garbling key. And this ensures that different distribution, different randomness for the garbling. But we are not done yet because what prevents the adversary from giving the hash of the distribution D and then providing gates that are totally inconsistent. So what we need to also provide is some proof that this gate is part of the preimage of this hash. So think about, I don't know, a Merkle tree, but actually we need something that is compatible with IO. And this is called SSB hashing, like somewhere statistically binding, but it can be built from LW. And yeah, for SSB hashing, like these two have size that is logarithmic in the size of the distribution. So basically here we will verify basically that the gate is a pre-image of the hash. And if that's not the case, we output false. Okay, this mechanism works on and shows that the adversary cannot input inconsistent gates. We are sure that different distribution imply different randomness for the garbling. But how can we prove that these still outputs values that are like that don't leak any information? Like, how can I be sure that the sample I produce in this way leaks no additional information except the sample itself? Like, ideally, how I prove security is that given the output, I can simulate this program so that on input that particular distribution, we get this output. But here we have an issue because this output I want to program could be much bigger than this. So the solution is to rely on a random oracle. It's the reason why we had these coins. Essentially, together with this stuff, we also give some random coin, some string U. And yeah, what the program performs is the following. At the beginning, so it will have some key k at, let's say. And as a first thing, it will try to decrypt U using this key k. And this encryption scheme will be authenticated. So if I give you a random string, the decryption will fail with overwhelming probability. So it will try to decrypt. If this succeeds, we will output the plain text. Otherwise, I will perform what is here. Right. And yeah, in this way, I can use the random oracle to program the output of this obfuscated program. In particular, I don't know, I can make sure that when you input this distribution D, the output will be a simulated garbled circuit that is programmed to output our ideal sample, the one that was given as input to the simulator. There are still a bit of issues that we need to take into consideration. In particular, there are two. The first one is that what prevents the adversary to garble some distribution D, half of the gate using the actual random oracle output, and the other half using some other random string gate generates. If it tries to do that with the current construction, it happens that we obtain a garbled circuit that is garbled inconsistently, so we are not even able to evaluate, because some gates will have the certain labels, some other gates will have like other labels that are inconsistent. Okay, so first issue is consistency of random oracle inputs. And the second issue is, what if I use this circle to garble some distribution D prime using the random oracle output of the distribution D? Then this program will generate a garbling of the distribution D instead of D prime. So the adversary will notice it. Okay. Garbling D prime with randomness for D. So basically, we want this trapdoor to be activated only if used in conjunction with D. Okay. All right. So to solve the first issue, we ask the adversary to provide also a hash of all the random oracle outputs. Okay. So the adversary with query D will obtain this huge vector of possible of answers. It will hash it. It will provide it as input. And yeah, basically, we will make sure of. I need to call edge page prime. Now I will feed into this PRF key, into this PRF both hashes, so that if I use a different hash H prime, we will garble in a different way, using different randomness. And yeah, I will also make sure that this U is consistent with this hash. U by prime, so there will be also some proof by prime, then H prime. Okay. So this is done. And there is the second issue. How do we ensure that we cannot use the randomness for D by garbling a distribution D prime? Well, just generate this K hat together with GK. That doesn't need to be hard copied. So without basically, if the adversary changes D or this, it will get a different K hat and a different GK. So this trapdoor will work only if it uses the simulated D and the simulated random oracles responses. Otherwise, it won't activate. And yeah, it has to provide consistent gates and use. Otherwise, the hash don't verify it. And this ensures that we are able to garble in SQL. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say.
Any questions? Or questions from the
I wonder like how this thing affects the current stage of, for example, doing data election or just doing coin tossing issues.
I mean, there is still, you have to, coin tossing, you cannot really do much. I mean, reasoning possibility, like, you cannot really get around it. Like, here we generate samples, but there is still this attack that cannot be prevented. Leader election, yes. I talked with Jesper about this. Yeah, now I don't remember exactly what we ended up seeing in that meeting. But yeah, there were some results. Also, there were some applications for Yozo. One is that, I mean, in Yozo, you need to rely on, to have adaptive security, security against adaptive corruption, you need to rely on erasures. If you have this, then you get. And for also there is this encryption to the future functionality in Yozo. Here, basically, you can take a message, you plug it into this with the distribution that essentially picks a random public key and encrypts it under that public key. Yeah, so you're able to encrypt to the future to somebody that you don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
The second part, no.
I didn't do the instrument.
So there's a. Oh, nothing. Investigation actually like of the last one.